on to our second speaker, and our second speaker is on home ground this morning, Candice Ramsammy from South Africa. She'll be talking about Hurt Boys, Hurt Others, weekly reports of violence exposure and onward IPV perpetuation amongst HIV positive and HIV negative adolescents.
That's a mouthful, hey. Thank you. So, good morning, everyone. I am Candice Ramsammy, and on behalf of my team, I will be presenting on Hurt Boys, Hurt Others. And this is a study that is conducted at PHRU, which is the Perinatal HIV Research Unit, and it is done in partnership with Stony Brook University. So we've had a great 2 days where we've had many speakers talk about brilliant presentations and speakers who've spoken about contributing factors to the HIV epidemic, right? And we looked at violence as well, as demonstrated by Rachel. And some of the things that we know is that intimate partner violence is linked to HIV risk. Okay, we know that it may be a key driver for HIV transmission. We know that men are often the perpetrators of this IPV, and we need to understand why are they perpetrating. There's literature that suggests that men who experience violence are more likely to perpetrate violence. And we also know that perinatally infected adolescents are also they're more vulnerable to this violence. Some of the things that we need more information on is the day-to-day experience of violence. How does violence play out in their day-to-day life, and how does it impact their behaviors? We also have a lack of studies on this perinatal or adolescents who are born with HIV, and we want to know about young men. You know, we've had speakers talk about how we need to engage young men in our research and in this conversation. And so I think this is a very key population to look at because they have the greatest potential to transmit HIV. And that is where our study comes in. It is an ongoing study called Tsamaisano, and we are looking at how daily experiences of violence impact IPV behavior, right? So Tsamaisano uses a longitudinal cohort survey design. So we follow a group of kids longitudinally. We have recruited 500 adolescents. Part of them were perinatally infected, and we also recruited HIV uninfected peers as a comparison group. They were all males. They were all between the ages of 15 and 19 years old, and they were living in and around the Soweto area, which is in Gauteng, South Africa. Or Johannesburg, South Africa, all right? These boys had to be in relationships with people that they saw face-to-face. We weren't taking online dating. And at the time of enrollment, they could have been sexually active if they were not in a face-to-face relationship. They had to have engaged in sex in the last month. We do have, I have a graph showing the distribution of age that we have in this cohort. They are primarily 15 to 17-year-olds and very few 19-year-olds, but we did match our negatives to our positives so that we can have this clear comparison between the age groups. I just wanted to demonstrate that we recruited all across Soweto to be able to get, because even within Soweto, there's varying socioeconomic and violence contexts, and we tried to capture all of that. We collected data using ecological momentary assessments, and this is a way to capture incidences in real time or as it happens. And the way we did that is we asked participants to complete surveys using a cell phone app. These surveys were sent to them once a week, and they completed them for 52 weeks or over a year. These surveys were asking questions on their emotional state, the experiences of violence, the perpetration of violence, and risky sexual behaviors. It took them about 3 to 4 minutes to complete. And what I'm going to present today is some of the preliminary data that has come in from this ongoing study. It's based on about 9,100 surveys that we have received so far. And I'm also going to focus it just on the experiences of violence and their perpetration of violence. When we asked them about experiences of violence, we looked at 3 types of victimization. We asked them about physical victimization, verbal victimization, and sexual victimization. So an example, and we asked them about that experience within the past week. An example would be, in the past week, did someone hit, push, slap, choke, or otherwise physically hurt you? We also asked questions on them perpetrating intimate partner violence. And if they had seen their partner in the past 24 hours, we asked them about physical IPV. And if they indicated that they had sex at that encounter, we also asked them if they used violence or threats to get their partner to have sex with them. So very intense questions for these young boys. So let's talk about some of the things we found. And I really just want to highlight the prevalence of violence experience in this cohort. And initially we did think that we'd find perinatally infected adolescents would have more experiences, but that wasn't the case. So I'm going to present on our whole sample. So this is a picture of all of the boys in Soweto, or at least within our sample. And we were looking at least one of the surveys that they sent to us, did they report violence? So if they submitted or sent us one survey that indicated violence out of 52, it counts as one case. If they had sent us 35 surveys and indicated violence 7 times, we are still going to count it as one case. Okay, so we are reporting at least once did you experience violence. And when it came to being a victim of violence, we found that 44% of our boys indicated that they experienced physical victimization at least once within the time frame that they were submitting surveys. We also had 55% that reported being a victim of verbal violence, and 35% of our sample reported that at least once they had experienced sexual violence victimization. It's a very high proportion of these boys admitting that. We also looked at their perpetration, and 14% of our boys reported that they at least once had perpetrated physical intimate partner violence, and 14% at least once had reported perpetrating sexual IPV against their partner. And so then we wanted to look at what are the relationship between experiencing violence and perpetrating violence. And we found that all forms of violence that you experience, all of them are associated they are all associated with and predict physical IPV as well as sexual IPV. So that really highlights all forms of violence that you experience make you more likely to perpetrate within your relationships. So to wrap this up, we did see that although the 14% of perpetration is comparable to other studies, that is a very high percentage of boys perpetrating violence. And these boys are 15 to 19. It's quite a young cohort, right? We also saw that these young men who experience recent violence are more likely to then hurt their partners. And using EMA and a longitudinal study design really gave us the opportunity to capture this data in real time. And if anyone is interested in how we implemented EMA, getting young boys to send us surveys once a week for a year, I do encourage you to go look at our poster during lunchtime that shows how we implemented it, the challenges we had, and some recommendations. But it was really a great opportunity to capture real-time experiences. All of our speakers have spoken to great opportunities for intervention. So just to highlight, there will be some structural changes that need to happen, or structural interventions that can reduce violence in the lives of these young boys. And also interventions that teach them skills around regulating their emotions and how they react to these events, building esteem, coping mechanisms. These are all ways that we can impact on the lives of these young boys. And it really, once again, I stress, is a key population because they are at greatest risk of transmitting HIV, but they're also at a critical period of development within their whole lifetime. And so we have the greatest opportunity to impact them and have lifelong changes. And so with that, I would like to thank our participants, first of all. Without them, we would not have all of this rich data, and the National Institute of Mental Health for supporting our research. Thank you so much.